Good morning, everyone. I'm Gary Senick, freelance writer, editor, and musician, friend and business associate of Dr. Sase, who's asked me to come to speak to you about the writing of economics today. So Dr. Sase has gone through what the synthesis essay exam is about. I'm going to talk to you about the synthesis exam, which I'm going to abbreviate as the synth exam, just because it's a lot easier to say than a big mouthful. So in the synth exams, you are being asked to synthesize all of the assigned readings, as noted by Dr. Sase, and lectures and videos from the course into a coherent whole that demonstrates your understanding of the material, as well as your ability to present the major themes, the similarities, and the differences that you find in that material. You are required to write about your topics in an original, clear, and concise manner that convinces your readers, both Dr. Sase and me and your peers in the peer review, that you are informed and impassioned about the subject that you're writing about. Your synth exams and term papers have a similar structure in that both of them have that introduction, development, and summary conclusion section. So what I want to do now is to address each of those sections with you. Your introduction. Your introduction begins with thesis, sentence, or sentences. John just referred to the meaning of what the thesis sentences are when he was giving you the verbal intro. What it is, a thesis sentence is a statement of intention that tells the reader what will follow in your paper. What I would like to see you do is to say, in this paper I will, or in this paper I will demonstrate, or in this paper I will explain, and then go into what it is you're going to do in the paper that you'll amplify in the development, and then finish up with your summary conclusion. Those ways of doing that really zero in on what you're going to do in your paper, and then you can use that as your key to amplify with detail in the body of your paper. So when I'm grading your papers, I look for those things. Somebody who has those kinds of thesis sentences in his or her paper, I say, yeah, they got it. They got it, and then that helps me to know what I'm going to be reading. The development. The development is the body of your paper. In the body of your paper, what you need to do is to explain your thesis sentence or sentences in detail. You want to make sure that the points that you make in your development have a beginning, a middle, and an end. Some writers will only give a partial explanation of the point that they're making. You know this material. You've been in class, you've read the material, you've watched the videos, so you know this stuff. But, for example, I don't know it. I don't know any of this. So you need to tell me what it is you're trying to say, not just allude to it. And that's true of any reader, even in your peer group. You need to be able to explain it in detail. So, beginning, a middle, and an end. Don't just make a statement, then trail off. Finish it. So, it's the whole idea of a grandmother. A grandmother, like as if your grandma was reading your paper. You want to be able to tell grandma what this paper is about so that she understands it. That's the idea. Okay, now a lot of people have good middle sections. That's where most of their information is located. But I always look for a good statement of purpose at the beginning, your thesis sentences, and a well thought out closing at the end as well. So something that summarizes the main points and then leads into your summary conclusion. Now, it is also important to make statements in your own words. John alluded to that in his introduction. But I have seen a lot of papers, both in synthesis exams and term papers, where the writer will make a statement in his or her own words, then give this big chunk of quoted material from a text or a video, then another sentence in his or her own words, then another big chunk of quoted material. That is not what you want to do. That really detracts from the overall quality of your paper. What you want to do is to be able to paraphrase the material in your own words. You can give a quote, but just don't use a lot of quoted material. Not a lot of verbiage. If there's something really essential, really important, fine. But not a lot of quoted material. Use your own words. Put your own spin on it. So paraphrasing of your own sources is important. And use direct quotes sparingly. Also, you want to make sure that you do use the source material that Dr. Sase has asked you to use. In the last go-around, when we did synthesis exams, there was a problem because a lot of the students only chose one or two sources to write about. For example, they used the textbook, not the videos. They used the videos, not curious alignments. So you want to be sure that you're thorough and use what John has asked you to use. That makes a difference. Now, personal information. Some writers will go on and on about themselves. And you don't want to do that. Sure, you're learning new material. You want to give your impression of it, but you don't want to make the paper all about you. And that's true about the synthesis exams and the term papers. You want to give that source material in the synthesis exams. You want to give that back in your own words. In the term papers, you're going to be writing about a subject of your choice that you've researched. So you want to present that research in a coherent and concise fashion. Now, sentence structure. In order to keep your prose style smooth and easy to read, I recommend that you vary your sentence structure. Now, how do you do that? What you do is to use a variety of sentences, declarative and sentences with an introductory phrase. Here's a declarative sentence. I am teaching this class. Just straight to the point. There's another declarative sentence. I am enjoying it, which I am. But if we had more than two of these in a row, it starts to get really boring. What you want to do is, after about two declarative sentences, use a sentence that begins with an introductory phrase like this. On Wednesday, comma, I will be at home. On Wednesday is an introductory phrase. There's a comma separating those words from the rest of the sentence. This gives a whole different feel to this section because it's not just a straight sentence. There's a phrase here to break it up. So you would be amazed as to, when you're reading, what a difference that makes. It really helps your prose to flow more smoothly and for you to look like a more professional writer. So try to do that. After every two or three declarative sentences, use a sentence with an introductory phrase. And the same thing is true after you've used a couple of sentences with introductory phrases, then switch back to using the declarative sentence. Now that's something that you can look at after you've written your paper. When you're editing your own work, you can go back and take a look at how you've written your papers and say, okay, I've got a couple of declarative sentences in a row. Let me change the next declarative sentence, make it a sentence with an introductory phrase, and the same after you've used a couple of introductory phrase sentences. It really makes a difference. I stress it very strongly. Another thing that writers do in synthesis exams and term papers is to use sentence fragments. That is, words put together that don't equal a whole sentence. You want to make sure that all the sentences you use are whole sentences. They have a subject, they have a noun, or a verb, and an object. I am teaching this class. I is the subject, am teaching is the verb phrase, and class is the object. So make sure that all your sentences are complete. It makes a real difference. Okay, clarification of names and terms. You want to clarify any names or terms that you use in your synth exams and your term papers. For example, you mentioned John Maynard Keynes in your paper. You probably all know who he is because you're in the urban econ course. But some of your readers, like Grandma, probably don't know who John Maynard Keynes is. So you want to put in English economist John Maynard Keynes. Salvador Dali. Most everybody knows who Salvador Dali is, right? But you should still put in Spanish painter, Spanish surrealist, something like that, just to identify that person. Same with terms. If you use an economic term, give a little parenthetical explanation of it. It doesn't have to be long, just a very short explanation. So the person reading the paper knows exactly what you're talking about and doesn't have to run to the dictionary or go on the computer to find out what it is you're trying to say. Punctuation. What you want to do is to put all of your commas, periods, semicolons, question marks, and other forms of punctuation inside quotation marks rather than outside. So let's say I am teaching this class came from a book. I was quoting it. Got your quotes around it, right? The period goes inside the quote. See, a lot of writers who put their punctuation over here, outside of the quotation mark. That is incorrect. You don't want to do that. You will look really professional if you keep your punctuation inside quote marks. Now, say you've got several different elements in your sentence. What you want to do is separate them with what are called serial commas. That's S-E-R-I-A-L, not like the breakfast cereal that you eat. Let's say I am teaching on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. I've got 3 different elements, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. What I've done is to put a comma after Monday, comma after Tuesday. Then there's the and Wednesday. So put the serial comma, first comma, second comma. A lot of writers will not have the second comma. It'll just say Monday, comma, Tuesday and Wednesday. And you're going to see that a lot in current newspapers and magazines and advertisements. But for your purpose, in writing professional college work, you want to use the serial comma. This is the professional way. This is the formal way rather than the informal. So we want to see that in your papers. Italicization. Always put books, magazines, and newspapers in italics. Now, article titles from a magazine or online, those go in quotes. Those have quotes around them. Now, another tool that will help to keep your works looking really professional is to keep your verbs together. And what do I mean by that? Often, people will put an adverb smack dab in the middle of a verb. And we usually talk like that. Like, instead of saying something generally was abandoned, we say it was generally abandoned. So the adverb is smack dab in the middle of the verb. But for your purpose, in writing professionally, you want to make it generally was abandoned. Keep was and abandoned together. Probably will be addressed is correct, rather than will be probably addressed. So you see, so probably comes first, then will be addressed, the verb is together. Now, just like adverbs, like generally, probably, modify verbs, so do adjectives modify nouns. Like, for example, all-time high. These 3 words all are separated by a space here. But what's correct is if you add a hyphen between all and time, because both these words modify high. So you want to make sure you've got a hyphen when you've got two adjectives modifying that noun. Another example of that would be small town economy. Small and town, two separate words, but they're both adjectives modifying economy, so stick that hyphen in there. It will really help you to look more professional and give you an edge. Another thing that a lot of writers do, they use the possessive, putting an apostrophe S where it doesn't need to be. Possessive is only when you're talking about when somebody owns something, there's ownership of it. It doesn't go with decades, for example. Like if you got 1900s, people put the apostrophe before the S. No, there's no apostrophe. It's just 1900s with a small s. You're going to see that a lot in advertisement when people say, I've got CDs for sale. They'll do it like CD apostrophe S. They're supposed to be CDs. CD, cat, CD, and then small s. So if you can do that, you're going to look a lot more professional. Now, repetitive words. Oftentimes when students are writing synth exams and term papers, they'll use the same word over and over again. Sometimes they'll use it like one sentence following another. The same word will appear. What you want to do is to make sure that you don't repeat words. When you do your edit, go through your paper and look to see, have I used the same adjective over and over again? Right now people use the word amazing a lot. Make sure that you don't do that. Make sure that you've got a variety of adjectives and descriptive phrases in your paper. It will really make a difference. Now, oftentimes writers will use but, to, and to start their sentences. You don't want to do that. Those are not good words for professionals to use to start your sentences with. What you want to do is to use however for but, in order to for to, and just skip and altogether as a starting word for your sentence. Just launch right into the subject of your sentence. Don't use and. Or you could put a semicolon, or just create a brand new sentence instead of starting with and. Now, if you are not an experienced writer, or if English is not your native language, I would suggest that you would want to have someone read your papers who has a good working knowledge of the English language, an English major, somebody at the Wayne State Writing Clinic. Is there a writing clinic here at Wayne?
Yeah.
Okay. Have someone there look your paper over once you've gotten it completed. Because that person will be able to say, okay, you've got run-on sentences here, you might want to move this around in your organization, you've got spelling errors, grammatical errors, that kind of thing. It really makes a difference. Because what I have found is that oftentimes these writers have really good ideas, there's really good research, what they've got content-wise is good, but their papers fall down because they're filled with technical errors. Grammatical, spelling, mechanical, that kind of thing. And then their papers are graded down because of that, even though the quality is actually really good. So I would very much make that recommendation, that you go the extra mile and have an English major read it or somebody at the writing clinic. That will really help you. John talked about, for your term papers, having a bibliography at the end. You don't need a bibliography for your synthesis exams, but you do for your term papers because you are going to be doing the research on your term.
They want the list of references at the end.
Right, but it's not the same as okay. a more standard bibliography. Yes, you're right, absolutely. You can use whatever style you're familiar with, but we ask that you do have a couple of elements that are standard. The name of the author, first, followed by the name of the book or the article title, and then the name of the periodical, if there is one, and then the name of the book publisher, and the publication date of the book. And if you are not sure where the pub date is, after the title page, flip the page over. That's the copyright page. And wherever it says symbol C and then the date, that's your copyright date. That's the date you want to use for your publication date. So like symbol C, 2010, that's the date we use, 2010. Now URLs, where students fall down a lot in using URLs is that they'll just give the URL, www.website.com, period. That's it. So when John and I go to your bib pages and just see these URLs, we don't know what these are. So make your URLs complete. In your bibliography, treat the URL like a standard bibliographic reference. Put the name of the author, the name of the article, the name of the website, and the date, if there is a date on the website, or whatever date you pulled the URL. Okay, so that's the name of the author, the name of the article, the name of the website, and the date. And if it's not the date of the website itself, then whatever date you pulled it. That will really help us to know what you're referring to. Spell check and grammar check. It is essential that you run your papers through spell check and grammar check when they're completed. I can't tell you how many people fall down by not doing that. Because you've got this great paper, you've done all your research, you've got this really strong paper, but then it's filled with grammatical errors, spelling errors, that could have been fixed just by running it through spell check and grammar check. Please do that. It makes a huge difference. Now, I'm going to get into the reviewing and editing and proofreading process in a minute. But I do just want to say one thing here. If you have time to step away from your paper for a while before you submit it, that is really good. You want to read your paper again after your initial writing. That's where you can look for things like declarative sentence, introductory sentence, spelling, grammar errors, that kind of thing. You will be amazed at what jumps out at you once you read your paper over again. A day is usually recommended. Give it a day, then go back to it. I know that isn't always possible because you're finishing your exams or your term papers like at the last minute, but at least give it a couple of hours. Just step away from it and then go back to it. You will be like an editor reading your own work, and you will be amazed at what jumps out at you. Trust me. Am I right on that, John?
Oh, yeah.
Also, if you have somebody else to read your paper, a friend, a relative, even before you submit it to an English major or somebody at the writing clinic, that will be really helpful because that person doesn't know what you're talking about. If something you said is unclear, that person can say, I don't understand this. What did you mean? Then you can clarify it. That makes a real difference. Now, good sources for writing. These two books are editor's Bibles. Chicago Manual of Style is a book published by the University of Chicago Press. And it is so thorough, goes into every aspect of writing, how to present the best professional writing. I know that for your bibliographies you're using MLA and other sources, but just as a general reference, this is a really good book. Another very good book is a very thin book called The Elements of Style. It's by Strunk, S-T-R-U-N-K, and White, W-H-I-T-E. This book goes into the writing itself, into your prose style. How to write a good sentence, what to do, what not to do. And the white is E.B. White, who wrote Charlotte's Web and Trumpet of the Swan, Stuart Little, books you might have read as a kid. But very good book. Very, very good book. And both bookstores and libraries should have these books. Now let's look at the synth exams and the term papers individually. Here are some suggestions for approaching your synth exams. Ask yourself, what are the most important elements of the source material? What are the highlights? The points that get the most coverage in the written and visual material and have gotten the most emphasis in class. You want to note these. Now, once you've listed these points, look for the themes and patterns in them and group them together. As John mentioned, he's chosen elements of your source material that do have a connection thematically. So you will be able to find things that are alike about them. It helps here to look for parallels and similarities. In addition, you want to look for the distinct differences in these points and note them too, because there are some. Next, you want to make an outline of these important themes, patterns, similarities, and differences. What I would suggest is to use the inverted pyramid approach. Inverted pyramid. What you do here is to list the most important, the most meaty, the most weighty elements and themes, and then go down in descending order from there. Use them, and then what are the different points that explain the main themes. Finally, you want to bring together the important themes from the source materials into a conclusion that connects them together in a thoughtful manner. You want to tell your reader what you got out of this material. Ask yourself, what did I learn? What inspired me? What caused me to see the subject of urban economics in a new way? Ultimately, the synth exams will reflect the facts that you have assimilated from the source material. You want, through these exams, to show John and me that you have understood this material well and have written intelligently about it in your own voice. So that's the key right there. That you've understood the material, have assimilated it, and have written about it intelligently in your own voice. Let's look at the review, editing, and proofreading for the synth exams. What John has done is written a really good section about reviewing a peer synthesis exam. What you want to do is divide up into groups of, say, 3. Well, first of all, you want to talk about what the themes, similarities, and differences are in the material. Note those. And then you could even exchange your completed exams with each other to read. So what John says is, what do you like best about your peer synthesis? Why? How might she or he do more of it? Is the paper clear as to what is being synthesized? For example, did your peer list the sources and cite them correctly? Is the presentation always clear to which source your peer is referring to at any given moment? Mark any places that aren't clear. Is the thesis of each original source clearly stated in the synthesis? Because all of you have read or viewed the same sources. Now you can say to your peer, well, I saw a different thesis, some different theses than you did. And then what are the differences there? What did you see versus what that person noted? You have noted key points from this material. See what your peer noted. Are those points the same? Are they different? If so, why? What about your peers' opinions in the synthesis? What are they? Are they valid? So where did you get lost in your peers' synthesis? Point those things out to him or her. What about the overall organizational structure? Does that work? Are there elements that are sort of spread out that could be brought together because they fit thematically? If so, point those things out. And then in the structure of the paragraph, too. Did the person use the inverted pyramid approach? The important stuff is at the beginning, followed by what explains it. If not, point that out. What about mechanical errors? Grammar, spelling, sentence structure, that kind of thing. Now, you don't have to comment on every typographical error, every misplaced comma, but if you're seeing consistent patterns, lots of misspellings, lots of declarative sentences in a row, that kind of thing, point that out to the person. What John and I have developed as a method of working together that we have found to be the most efficient is something that you can use in the writing of your paper. First, you rough out ideas as they come to mind using sticky notes, napkins, a spiral notebook, whatever media is available. Then organize your material into the appropriate structural framework, that is, the outline. Write your first draft in one sitting, without getting bogged down with grammar and structure and all that stuff. Just write it. Ernest Hemingway said that he always wrote drunk and then edited when he was sober. We don't recommend that you write drunk, but whatever.
Sure, why not?
Then, as I mentioned, leave the finished draft alone until the next day, then go back to it. Ask one of your peers another set of eyes to review your work and to make suggestions. Then make your changes. Then go to the professional, go to the writing clinic, go to an English major. Then read aloud your semi-final version. When you read your work aloud, you will be so struck as to where you stumble in your reading. When you stumble in your reading, that's where the reader's eye will stumble when he or she reads your paper. So you want to rework that so that everything is smooth. That makes a huge difference.